So welcome back, and so this morning, before the break, we were talking about doing the ultimate analysis to the persons. So with that kind of ultimate analysis or investigations, we cannot find and pinpoint either outside of the aggregates or within the aggregates. But at the same time, we cannot kind of deny that there is no persons at all, or self or I, because that goes against our direct experience of direct experience of someone who is experiencing, as mentioned before, directly experience sometimes happiness, sometimes suffering, sometimes joyful, sometimes very miserable, and so forth. So when we do that analysis, we cannot pinpoint and find. At the same time, we cannot deny there is no one who experiences those experiences. And so therefore, it has to exist, but it cannot be found that way. It cannot, therefore it cannot exist inherently or ultimately. So then how does it exist? It does exist. We cannot deny that. And then, the way self or I or person exists is by merely imputation, by merely label, by merely designations on the basis of the aggregates. There's a basis to impute or label or designate as a persons, but those object of designations, the basis itself is not persons. As we have, each of those aggregates are not a person, even though they are the basis to which we label, which we impute, which we designate as a persons. And so therefore, the person, the self, the I, is merely labeled, merely imputed, merely designated on valid basis. And that is how the person exists. And the person exists, the self exists, the I exists, and function only on that merely basic level, designation level. So when we come to that understanding, then you find a middle way, free from two extremes. The extreme of nihilism, where we think that there's no self at all, self does not exist at all, or the extreme of idealism, where you think there is more than what there is, which means ultimately existing I, inherently existing I, self which is not there. So our mind, and so then in that way, then you are able to, we are able to see the middle way, free from the two extremes. And when we understand that everything, the self and all others, merely it exists but only on that level, only on merely imputation level, merely on designation level. And when you understand them, that's when you have more correct understanding of emptiness. That is middle way, free from the both extremes. So maybe I might want to go a little bit maybe go a little bit explanation, a little further on that. When we understand that everything exists by merely leveling on merely on the basis of merely designations level by the thoughts, by the mind, then that is when we have a understanding of the subtle, the very subtle depending arising. So as I was mentioning yesterday, everything is empty because of dependent arising. And everything is dependent arising because of emptiness. Everything can be established and proceeded as empty because of everything is dependent arising. And everything is able to be established as a dependent arising because of emptiness. And so so then I think I'm going to kind of expand a little bit on dependent arisings. All conditioned phenomena. So maybe let me say, you can see maybe there is understanding of three different levels of dependent arising. Okay, three different levels. Understanding three different levels of dependent arising, dependent originations. All the conditioned phenomena has all these three levels of dependent arising. Whereas non-conditioned phenomena or permanent phenomena has two levels of dependent arising, but not the first level of dependent arising. Okay. And just first level of dependent arising is in terms of conditioned phenomena, impermanent phenomena. There are three levels of dependent arising. First level is that all conditions or impermanent phenomena are dependent on its preceding cause and conditions. Okay, that is one level. No conditioned phenomena or impermanent phenomena can exist without depending on its preceding cause and conditions. Second is that all these conditioned phenomena, impermanent phenomena, not only depend on preceding cause and conditions, but it depends on which is not preceding but together with that, its parts. Okay, for it to exist as it is. Without its parts, the wholeness of that thing cannot exist. So it's dependent on each part that makes that whole. You know? So not only this table is dependent on its preceding cause and conditions, you know, the carpenters who made it, and all others materials that need it, and then the tools, the carpenters, and the raw materials to make it, and all of that, its preceding cause and conditions. But it also depends on its part. If you take away all the legs, then this would not be table and wouldn't function as a table. And if you take this part, that part, every part that makes this table is part, then it, and so the table to exist as a table depend on all these different parts that make the table and function as a table. So the parts are not preceding, but is together at the same time, you know. And then the next level is, you know, all the condition or impermanent phenomena, such as the tables and the books, the cups, the flower, all of Mac, all of that. After all this, its parts, which is the basis for the table, the basis, all the legs and everything, that parts, the basis which make the table, coming together, and then on the basis of all these, the parts or the basic coming together, then the mind to label it as a table. When we put all together, and it has certain functionings of table, and then our mind's label is a table. Before the mind, that label is a table. You know, when someone encountered it, they don't know what it is. They don't know how to relate it as a table. They don't know how to relate it as a table. They don't relate as a table, and it doesn't function as a table for them. It might function something else. So it depends on the mind to label after the basis come together, and then to label it as whatever object that it is. So it depends on that mind. So you can see three different way of understanding dependent arising by depending on other factors. Okay, its preceding cause and conditions, depending on its parts, and depending on the mind, the subject, the mind, to label, to impute as a whatever object that it is on the valid basis. So you impute, and so it depends on all these other factors, other conditions. And because all these phenomena depend on all those so many different factors and conditions, and therefore it cannot be independent, existent. It cannot be inherently existent. You know, things could change by changing the cause and conditions and the other factors. Therefore, it can't be inherent, existent. If it is something inherently existing, it will always remain that way, no matter what happens, no matter what other cause and condition not come together, whether parts come together or not come together, it will be as it is, if it's inherently existing. But when the other factors, the conditions changes, then the thing changes. and that clearly means it's not inherent existence. It only comes into existence that way when all these factors, all these conditions come together. Then only then it comes to existing that and functioning in that way. So therefore, it cannot be inherent existence. So I spoke about all the impermanent conditioned phenomena having all these three dependent arisings. But there are some phenomena that is known as permanent. And those permanent phenomena, does not have the first level of the dependent arising, depending on its cause and conditions. Because it's permanent, it doesn't have preceding cause and conditions. But it has the two other level of the dependent arising. It depends on its parts, and it depends on the mind, which impute and design or level as it is. And so therefore, whether it is permanent or impermanent, all phenomena are dependent arising. All phenomena are dependent arising. So in Buddhist studies, when they explain about phenomena or existence, first of them, they kind of divide into two categories: permanent phenomena, non-permanent phenomena. Okay. Among all the existence phenomena, there are certain which are permanent existence or phenomena, and there are impermanent phenomena. And many of you might be, what is permanent phenomena?
Time and space, or?
Yeah, space.
Space.
Yeah. Time, there are different Buddhist opinions among different Buddhist tenets. There's a different view on time. But when it comes to space, then they all kind of have agree on same. So there is I was saying permanent, impermanent, and within the impermanent, then they have three categories. Physical matters, non-physical, or non-matter, non-physical, like the consciousness, and then impermanent phenomena with neither of them, such as the person. The person is not a physical matter, it's not a mind, but it's impermanent. So it is impermanent with neither the physical matter, neither the mind. And so three categories of that. And then permanent as a space is given as a example of permanent. And because, of course, even though space can be changed, okay? I drink a little bit and there is more space in this cup. I fill it up, there's less space. Though you can see the change in that way. We put more things here, then there is less space. We clear all the things and there is more space in that way. But the nature of the space does not change, whether I put more water or not. The nature of the space does not change because of that. And so that in that way it is permanent, okay? Whereas everything else, the nature change because it cause and condition, the nature itself changes. Nature of that phenomena itself changes.
The space is still there.
The
space is
still there, and it's the same nature. It's just because of that the space is taken away or not taken away to that. But the nature of the space hasn't changed. It has not become from being non-obstructive to becoming obstructive anymore. Nature like that. Or the space which is here, because putting more is gone, but again, if I reduce, it will be there. Same space there, Unlike like this cup, if I destroy it, then I don't have the same cup. I can have another cup, but in a space, it can be less or more with what I put on that, but the space is still there. And so anyway, therefore, all phenomena, permanent, non-phenomena, permanent or impermanent, all phenomena are dependent on arising, not necessarily depending on its preceding cause and conditions, but all are depending arising because it depends on many other factors. As I mentioned, its parts, basis, the subject, the mind, that impute level, and so forth. So there is. So when we talk about dependent arising, we have to understand there are gross level and more subtle level of dependent arising. The gross level of understanding dependent arising, which understanding of impermanent objects, depending on its preceding cause and conditions, that understanding does not give us necessarily that understanding will help us to understand emptiness, but that itself understanding is not necessarily understanding emptiness. Do you get it? It's understanding of impermanent, things changing due to cause and condition and all of that. And that by having that understanding, it does help us to overcome the permanent grasping, okay? Certain level of ignorance, permanent grasping, but not the subtle delusions and the fundamental ignorance. It can help to have better understanding of emptiness through that understanding, but its understanding itself is not and so in order to have the understanding of emptiness, to have that correctly, then we need to have the understanding of dependent arising in a subtle way that is merely imputed by the mind, the subject. Can you see the differences? And so but each of those understanding of dependent arisings from can help us to have the subtle understanding dependent arising the emptiness. When we do the ultimate analysis, that Nagarjuna and many others great scholars have as it has explained in many of their writings, there are many different ways of analyzing, meditating, investigating, many different ways of ultimately analyzing, and through sudden reasoning and logics, and you find in terms of the nature of things, the reasoning and logic, whether it is one or many or separate from that objects. There is a analysis of in terms of the cause, whether cause is come from non-cause or from self-cause or other cause, and both of them, and such in terms of analyzing the result, whether it exists, whether it does not exist, that kind of analysis. So you find so many different way of analyzing that you find in those Madhyamika middle way schools. But of course we can utilize whatever reasoning logic that we find more effective to ourselves, individually. And that is all, again, many of the practice meditation is that, there are so many different practice meditation in dealing with same emotions, or in dealing with the same situation, same problem, and certain particular practice, certain methods, certain particular meditations are more effective for certain individuals than others. And so we learn all of them, and we experiment with them, with our own personal experiences, and then see what is more effective. It's just like medications, Even we are trying to treat same disease, everyone responds differently to the medications. It has to be treated according to individuals. Just because someone has same problem, you can't give the same medicine without really diagnosing the individual patients. Okay? Even though we might have same allergy, same medication will not work for every one of us. Because we have different immune system and different way, and some medications are too strong for someone, and for someone is too not strong enough, and all of that, And same thing in a lot of those practice meditation, and that is one thing, I say, sometimes we think, why Buddhism is so complicating? And so much there. Why don't make it so very simple? One practice. Why don't we just have one practice and we do that? That would be great. That would be wonderful. I would like to have that one. But it doesn't work that way, because there is no one particular meditation practice which is equal effective for everyone in the same way. Even with just lunch, we found a vegan and non-vegan. It would have been easy if we just doesn't need to have all these choices. But then some people cannot eat it, And so similarly, so I came that because I was talking about so many different reasoning and logic that you use, different reasoning logic you find in those Madhyamika's middle way schools of investigating on emptiness, of nature of self and phenomena. And so we try to study and try to find which is more effective to us, and then whatever we can relate more strongly, more effective, and we use that in our meditation, in our practice. And that will be same with all other kind of practice and meditations. But also, sometimes we might think, this is effective to me, this is helpful, therefore I don't need to study others or practice. Well, we need to study practice, even though it's one particular effective or some are not so effective. If you want to help others, you need to study all of that, because some people will find this others more effective, more helpful. That is why the bodhisattvas are encouraged to study even non-bodhisattvas practices, even others, so that you can be more helpful and benefit to others who have different mentality, different mindsets, so you can continue to help them whatever their needs are. But in terms of our personal practice, then of course there will be particular meditation practice that you find effective, and you try to apply that, rely on that more. And then it is called the king of the reasoning, and the dependent arising, to understand emptiness, using the reasoning and logic of dependent arising in order to understand emptiness, is the kind of the best. It's the most strong, one of the best or strong reasoning logic. So that is using that as well. So coming to dependent arise on further level, in terms of self, or person or I, there is understanding that we are dependent arising, in a sense, that our existence is dependent on our parent. Without our parent, we wouldn't be there. This body, is result of our parents' sperm and eggs. So we are very much depending on their cause in that way. Depend on those cause and conditions. Without that, we wouldn't be there. Without our grandparent, our parent wouldn't be there, and we wouldn't be there. Without our grandparent, our grandparent. So you can go back as much as you can. As you go back, then you begin to see how we all are related. When we don't really think that way, we think I am very individual. Very individual, independent. I don't have to depend on anyone. I can be myself. Well, the reality is we are dependent on. We don't want to just not acknowledge that. And if you go back and back, ancestor back and back, then you all are related. I saw some articles where they are saying how many millions of DNA of Genghis Khan in Europe and many places, and that is one person. Before all these people, millions of people, they don't know how they are related. They all think we are so unique individuals. Just want that kind of research, or through DNA kind of connected so many millions of people. And if you go back, then we all come from the same. We all are related, connected in that way. So what I was trying to explain was how we are depending on, and you can go back and back from the very beginning of our existence in this planet. And we can go even further than that. And then, how we are dependent for our existence and for our survival on so many other sentient beings all the time, all the time. Even the food that every day we survive on depends on so many, because we don't grow our own food anymore. Even if we grow, we are only growing very portion of that, very small amount of that. Even that, we are getting the seeds from others. So it's impossible to not depend on others for our survival. Even if we don't want to defend, we don't want to depend on others, it's almost impossible. Talk about food, talk about the clothes that we wear, everything's, when we get sick, we're dependent on others because we cannot take care of ourselves, our sickness, our all of that. Everything's that we, the job that we do, without others, we will not have the job. Without others creating the job, providing the job, we will not be able to create the job. Or even you are creating your own job as a business person, without the customer, you will not have that your business. Either we do job for someone who create the job for our kind of surviving, let's say, or even we are creating our own job. We need others to do job for us. Without them, it will be very difficult to do yourself, everything yourself. Even you are able to do everything yourself, still you need a customer. Without others, you have no customer. Without customer, you wouldn't be able to survive your business, able to survive yourself. So when you look everything from, we're so dependent on others for our survival, our existence. And then, of course, we are the self, the person is very much dependent on the aggregates. Without the aggregates, there wouldn't be the self. If you take away, again, as I mentioned, if you take away all the mental, all your experience, all your mental consciousness, all of that, there's no self. If you take away your physical body, there's no self that we relate with. So for the self, the person, I to exist, it depends on all the aggregates, and each of those aggregates depend on many other cause and conditions for it to exist, to survive. For our body to survive, we depend on all the elements, the water, the earth, the heat, the air, the space. So we are so, for our existence, for our survival, we depend on our aggregate, and each of those, our aggregates, again, depend on so many causes and conditions. And not only that, as I mentioned before, then on the basis of those aggregates coming together, and then, mind labeling as me, I, self, person on that basis. And on the basis of that, that is how the self exists. by depending on. So, understanding that on many different levels of depending arising. And that will be same with our aggregates and all other phenomena. The problem is at the moment, when there's a sense of self, when we have that sense of self, how does the I or me or self appear to us? It doesn't appear as depending arising by depending on all these cause and conditions, isn't it? We don't see how the self is dependent on all our parent, grandparent, parent, all of that contributing for our existence, how we are depending in that way, how we are depending on others, how we are depending on other sentient beings, how we are depending on the elements, all of that, how we are depending on our aggregates, how we are depending on our mind, and all of that. It doesn't appear that there is a sense of me, I, who is almost like kind of independent there by itself. Not only there is appearance of that, there is belief, grasping and believing that is how self exists. Another layer. Appearance is one thing and believing is another thing. You can have sudden appearance, but you don't believe that. So there is problem with the appearance, but there is no problem with believing that, grasping that. But in our case, there is that appearance, and then there is also same grasping with that and believing in that, and that becomes the biggest problems due to that kind of misconceptions, misunderstanding. When we kind of discuss like that, when we talk about, I think intellectually we understand a little bit of depending arising. We talk about so many different levels of depending arising. Intellectually, but experientially, we have totally opposite. Therefore, meditation is a key to bring that intellectual understanding into experiential understanding. If we don't do that, practice meditation and repeat that again and again, just by having that intellectual understanding will not really overcome our ignorance. Definitely, it's better than not understanding intellectually. There's no doubt about that, But in terms of real transforming our heart and our mind, it is not enough. So that is meditations is the tool, the key to bring that intellectual understanding into experiential understanding. Thank you. And it's the same as I mentioned, whether it's a person or whether we are looking at any of the objects here, When we see the flower, how does the flower appear to us? How do we grasp? There's kind of independent flower there. You can't see the farmer. Can you see the farmer inside the flower? We don't see when you see the flower. You don't see the farmer. You don't see the seed. You don't see the clouds, the rain, the waters. You don't see the sun, the light. And you don't see all the fertilizers, whether it is fertilizer for the farmers or fertilizer that is kind of washed away by the rains and whatever, those different things. And all of them so many cause and conditions together that make the flowers, and depending arising by depending on so many those conditions. And when you see the flower, we don't see all of them there. We always see just flower as the independent there by itself. Intellectually, when we discuss, intellectually we understand how flowers produce, or how flowers but on experiential level we don't at the moment. There's a huge gap. Through practice, meditations, then slowly when you see the flower, then you are able to see all of that: the sun, the cloud, the rain, the waters, the farmers, the seed, whether it's a seed planted a farmer, or another kind of wind blowing it, or another bird throwing it, or another animal carrying it, whatever, the seeds, all of that. When you see all of that, then you see more totality of the flower, the more wholeness and totality of the flower, the more wholeness, totality of yourself and all the phenomena. Yeah, at the moment it's hard to see that. So that was we were talking about dependent arising, many different arising. So in meditations, we have to kind of combine. I think it's better. So in meditation, sometimes we start with trying to see how the self appear to us, to our mind, and how the self, how our mind and we grasp on the self. Okay, so trying to have a strong sense of, trying to cultivate a strong sense of feeling of I or me, strong. When it's subtle, it's hard to recognize how the self appear to our mind, and how our mind grabs the self is when it's subtle. When you are saying, I'm going for a walk, it's very subtle. I'm going to have something I'm going to eat now. It is subtle, so it is hard to really. But let's say when you have a strong anger, strong emotion, strong fear, there's a very strong sense of me or I, which is fearful, which has been hurtful, someone insulted me and abused me, and so there's a very strong sense of me or I, which you feel so strong. That is when there's strong sense of self, and that is more easy to recognize if you check that. And so and of course, the difficult point is when we have that strong emotion, we don't remember that to do that. And when we try to meditate and try to see, then the self is not strong. It's almost like very inactive. So really difficult to recognize how the self appear to our mind, and how our mind kind of grabs self. And that is one of the and so sometimes it is helpful to kind of, through imaginations or through memories, something, when you are calm and peaceful, you try to recall certain events where it can kind of stir you up, you know. And then when there is a very strong sense of I or self, due to that past experience, maybe you have not been able to let it go, for example. When you think about that, when you reflect on that, then that strong emotion can arise, and strong self can arise. And then you, from one corner of your mind, you try to check, watch, like a, police watching with one side of your mind with the camera, and seeing how does the self appear to you or to your mind, and how does the mind grabs on the self. That is one. So so when we do that, if we have better understanding, then we really have a better understanding because when we say selflessness or emptiness of self, we are negating a self that does not exist, but our ignorance believe it exists. Okay? And then there is self which exists, which we don't need to negate it. Okay? And we get confused with these two things. The self to be negated and self to be not negated. And so until we are able to see, then we cannot differentiate these two selves. And then in many of the teaching, they say, trying to hit an arrow without a target, you miss the target. And so that is one of the reasons. So you can start with that, and then trying to do, once you have identified that kind of self that does not exist, but our mind or ignorance grabs and cling and believe it exists, and then we do the analytical meditations, analysis to negate that self, then it becomes more effective. Then trying to do that meditation without identifying what is being negated, that self, and so first, sometimes it is good to start with that kind of identifying the self that is to be overcome, negated, and then once having identified that self, then doing the analysis, the meditations, whatever different meditation technique that I have explained, different reasoning that you find, you can do that, and then through that kind of whatever different meditation that you use, different reason, logic, at the end it always lead to that complete negation of that self, that is to be negated. And then you come to a place where it is absolute absence of that self, negated and absence of that self. And so you try to remain in that as much as possible, in that, once that self has been negated, and merely absence of that self, and merely like the species, merely absent of that, then you try to remain in that as much as possible. And then, how does the self exist? And then it exists merely by imputing, as I mentioned before, merely by imputation, and that is how thing exists. And so coming to that. Or in some time, when we do that kind of analysis, and if you feel if you feel that you are going to some kind of nihilism, where you are really feeling there is no self at all, and you feel that it's going to the other extreme, nihilism, then you can try to focus on dependent arising. Okay? Dependent arising, you can try to focus on dependent arising. How the self or I exists by depending on its cause and conditions, how the self and I exist by depending on its parts, the basis, and how it exists by depending on the subject, the mind that impute, and all of that, that dependent arising. And as you focus on dependent arisings, if that dependent arising become more solid, and again, as dependent arising, as you reflect on that dependent arising of the self, but if your self started to feel again more concrete, more solid, and more real, then again you do the negations. Do you get it?
Mm-hmm.
So that way we balance. When you feel nihilism, then you focus on the dependent arisings. When you feel if it's going towards the extreme of nihilism, you try to focus more on dependent arising. And as you focus on dependent arising, if you feel you are going towards the other extreme, eternalism, eternalism, where you started to feel more concrete, more solid, and it's more real than what is there. And then again, your negations. So that is how you balance. And sometimes you do sometimes through that kind of the negations and focus on dependent arising in back and forth. Through that understanding, then again, then seeing how that our mind grasping of the way the self exists of phenomena, how that is. Through that understanding, then you are able to understand how that mind which is grasping is totally mistaken, how that ignorance is totally mistaken, how totally misperception. So through that understanding, again, it helps. So again, sometimes you start with negations and then go to the dependent arisings, and then try to see how we grasp the self, or our mind grasps the self. And so since after going through that, you have certain understanding, and then you begin to see how that mind is totally mistaken and totally misconceptions, how it's ignorant and that. So sometimes you start a dependent arising and go to the negations. Sometimes you start with negations and go to the dependent arisings. And then after that, again, analyzing how the self appears to our mind and how our mind grabs to self. Sometimes you start with that and then you go to the negations. So, but basically it is kind of trying those different meditations.
Mm-hmm.
And see how you find more, for individually, how you find more effective, more beneficial. Okay. Mm. So from this where Shariputra, not Shariputra, Bodhsa Masato Avalokiteshvara explaining to Shariputra, try to look all five aggregate also empty of inherent nature. From that, it starts the path of, in terms of the path of accumulations. So when we talk about the path to enlightenment, then in many Buddhist teachings, they explain about 5 paths, in terms of gradual path towards enlightenment, whether it's individual liberation or fully enlightenment, the both sort of path. the path of accumulations, starting with path of accumulation, then path of preparations, then path of seeing, then path of meditations, and the final, the path of no more learning. In terms of individual liberation, then you arhat. In terms of bodhisattva path, then you become Buddha. Okay, so through 5 paths. So here also it explained that. So when from this point, here is explaining how to progress to the path of accumulation and path of preparation, and how to progress to that through having the wisdom that realizes the emptiness. Okay. In order to enter the first path, in bodhisattva path, first you need to have bodhicitta. Okay. Without the bodhicitta, you will not have entered the first path. Okay. And for some bodhisattvas, they already have realized emptiness before that bodhicitta. For some, the bodhicitta first and emptiness later. So it depends on different bodhisattvas. You know, it is said the strong, sharp faculty bodhisattvas, first they have understanding emptiness, then bodhicitta. But maybe less sharp faculty bodhisattva, first they have bodhicitta and then emptiness. Okay, so whatever, in order to enter the first path, you need to have the bodhicitta. And then, you know, then you have the experiential understanding of the emptiness, not just intellectual, experiential understanding. But in this, the first path of accumulation, even though it's experiential understanding of emptiness, but it is still with concept. It is still with the reasoning and logic. So when you use reasoning and logic, it is still with concept. Okay. But it is an experiential understanding. You know, as you do more and more meditation, more and more practice, so your concept become kind of less and less. You know, in the first path, there is 3 initial stages, middle stages, late stages. And second, the path of preparation, also there are 4 stages. It is called the stages of heat, peak, and the stage and then patience stages and the supreme stages 4. So as you go from one stage to another stage, and within these 4 stages, so in your meditations on emptiness, you have less and less concept, less and less dualistic views. You know, so it becomes more subtle and subtle. More subtle and subtle. You know, and then when you see the third, the path of seeing, then that is when you have direct realization and emptiness. And in that direct realization and emptiness, without any dualistic view, no dualistic, and then that is again, you still need to progress through the path of meditations. And so that is how progress. And so here, when you start with that, it starts with the path of seeing. So it's the same spelling of seeing, but it's seeing with the mind. And so when you say seeing, it means directly seeing. Okay. Before that, the emptiness is seen or realized, but not directly. And when you reach that, then you see directly. And so that is. So I think maybe because I think I have been going so much, blah 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 blah. I didn't give any opportunity to ask the questions. Any questions? Any comments? Any questions?
I was thinking, I guess, you have such a conventional mind. When we were looking at the flowers, and you were saying, we see them, we're not seeing the dependent arising
Mm-hmm.
in the flowers when we're looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what's so difficult about that for me is that I don't have an enlightened mind, so I try and imagine how I would see that, but with my limited mind right now, I can't imagine how I would see it, because I would have there would be no, it would take up all the space in my mind, because my mind's not very big, So when you were saying that, you were like, we just see the flower, and I'm like, it would be exhausting if, like, everything I saw at that level. It would just be incredible.
It
So
will
it's
not
really
be
a question.
when you see it. It will be not exhausting. It will be liberating.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the moment, because we are trying to see each of them, we have to think each of them.
Yeah,
Think
yeah.
each of them. So that requires a lot of thinking, a lot of new ideas, no concepts, new kind of remembering old memories and what you have seen and all of that. So it seems exhausting. But when you have that realization, you see everything once. So it's not like you are trying to think this and that. And so therefore, it will not exhausting, but it will be liberating. Of course, as you mentioned, we can kind of only imagine at the moment
Yeah.
what it is like to see that.
So it's kind of like the scene in the Matrix, where you're like,
Yeah, everything is once.
all of a sudden he's like, but it's like, even thinking about that, like, I can't even wrap my mind around what that would even, look like. It's really fascinating.
Yes, please.
Is the practice of the middle way the realization of emptiness?
Yes, 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 yes. When we have understanding of emptiness, then you will have the middle way understanding, that we are free from two extremes.
So it is not one preceding the other. It is.
Yeah, it's just when you have correct understanding emptiness, then you have the middle way understanding.
Okay.
And when you have realization middle way, then correct middle way understanding, then you will have the understanding of emptiness. So it is not one preceding others. Whether our understanding of realization or emptiness is correct or not correct is depending whether we have found the middle way. Because sometimes we go too far away to the extremes. And if we do that, then we haven't found the middle way, and that means our understanding of emptiness is still not correct, still went too far away. Either we go too far away, or whether we don't go far enough. That is the kind of problem, even in our life, isn't it? In everything. That is the challenge, the finding the balance, the middle way. Sometimes we push too hard. Sometimes we don't push enough. Again, there is extreme, isn't it? Sometimes we become too lazy and we don't push ourselves. Sometimes we push too hard, more than we should, and then we kind of break down. And again, not being able to find the balance, the middle way. And I think that apply in everything, finding the balance, the middle way. And all the Buddha's teachings and message is always like that. Not only when it comes to the view, the emptiness, but also when it comes to the meditation, the practice. All of them, life, it's all about finding the middle way, the balance. In terms of practice, how to know, learning how to put more effort when it needed, and how to relax when it need to be relaxed, and finding that balance. Sometimes we don't put effort enough, and sometimes we don't know how to relax, and we push to the point where we break down. And so, again, meditation is finding that balance and knowing when to relax, and knowing when to kind of put more effort or harder. And that is, again, you find that instructions, teachings, practice in meditation, the Buddha's teachings. In terms of life, as Buddha said, we cannot kind of starve ourselves to the death, because it's precious and we have so much potentials. At the same time, we cannot kind of go to the other extreme where you just kind of completely kind of indulge yourself into all kind of things, So again, not going the extreme that way and this way, and again finding, and I think that I find very fascinating. Even though when we think of middle way, we always connect with the view, the emptiness view. But if you kind of study and read and observe all the Buddha's teaching, it's always everywhere in every message is always the balance, the middle way. Yes.
I find it very fascinating. It kind of goes along with what you were saying of the Bodhisattva path and the Arhat path, like of going for enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, but also for the benefit of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always something I feel like I'm trying to find the balance between. Of like, sometimes I find it more like I find myself more able to do meditation and do practice to try and help the benefit of all sentient beings, or sometimes to help myself. It's just difficult to feel when that's the more.
Yeah, I think as long as we have the right intention, motivations, I think that is the key. Even sometimes you feel like you need a meditation for yourself, because your mind is not grounded. Because your mind is not grounded, you find your mind is not grounded. Therefore, you feel you need a meditation to make yourself grounded, your mind be grounded. Sometimes you find your mind is too kind of, too busy and too active, and not being able to stabilize, and so forth, and you feel you need the meditation to kind of calm down, stabilize that. But at the same time, while you are doing that to stabilize in that, it seems like yourself, but just bringing the bodhicitta motivations that if I'm not stabilized myself, if I'm not grounded myself, my mind will go, I cannot be much benefit and help to others. And therefore, even just settling my mind, grounding my mind, bringing peace in myself, calmness in myself, so that I can be more benefit and help to others. So if you can relate, you can bring through that bodhicitta motivation and relate with that, then it can become, even that can become a leading towards bodhisattva path. So only things that we need to relate that with that, understand and relate that, finding a grounded peace, stability in yourself is not only about yourself. In order to be more selfish to others, in order to be more beneficial, that's crucial and needed. And so I think that can help. Yeah? So then in that way, maybe you don't have to struggle that struggles. Don't have to go through that struggle. Yeah? Yes, I'm coming.
I was wondering, so like I've read a lot about emptiness.
Uh-huh.
I do meditation as I can. But like bringing the two, the meditation and the study together,
Mm-hmm.
into the practice of meditation,
Mm-hmm.
I find that difficult sometimes. Just wondering what kinds of practices
Mm-hmm.
you do in meditation to analyze emptiness.
Uh-huh. Well, I think some of the point I already kind of discussed, in meditations, as I mentioned, one meditation is trying to um, understand how our mind cling and grasps and apprehend the self when we have strong sense of self. Just observing it, you know, from sight of your mind. While of course because there are so many different state of mind, and many mind can manifest at one time. So while that one mind of feeling of me or I, which has been kind of hurt or fearful, whatever that mind is manifesting, at the same time with other mind skillfully from one corner of your mind, you observe that, watch that, and then really understanding what we talk about self-grasping ignorance through your observation, not just from reading. Of course, the reading and studying help us to have a better understanding and identifying those thoughts, those emotions. It gives tools, but the real identifying that is through our observations. And so that kind of observation with one side of the mind then can give us more certainty about all those teachings says, how self-grasping apprehend or misapprehend or grasp that. So then with our own experience, then we are able to observe it and then be convinced and certainty about that. So that is and that. And then the next is, doing the different, as you studies, you find many different analysis in the studies, and using those analysis, for example, when you see that, and then you can see there is our mind is grasping there is inherently existing self, I. And if there is inherently existing self, I, so then using all this analysis, how can it be that? How can, if it's inherently existing, how can it exist that way? And if it is, and so using all this analysis to kind of to come to conclusion how things are not inherently, not truly independent existence through all different analysis. And once you come to that kind of analysis, and as I mentioned, when there comes through that kind of negations, when you come to the kind of the absence of that inherently existing self, then you try to remain in that absent, empty spaces for a while, It could be a few minutes more, and when your mind started to become kind of wandering and not being able to remain there, then again you can restart again the whole analysis and come to that state and remain that state very strongly concentrated. But when you again state kind of try to become wandering, but again you can do analyzing, you can go back and come to that state and try to remain that's one way. And then after that, as I mentioned, then after that kind of negation, then you kind of refute and negate such a non-existence of such inherently truly existing self. And then, but even though there's not truly, but there is a self. So then how does the self exist? And then the self exists by merely imputed, merely labeled by your mind. And that's how self exists. And so you can try to remain in that state by state, in a state of mind where you think the self is merely imputed, and that is how it exists, merely on imputation, designation level, and try to feel that as much as possible. You know, and still, even with that, if you still have some doubt whether the self really exists or not, you know, even if you are not 100% sure, you know, if you still doubt it, then you can do the more gross, depending arising meditations.
I think for me it's hard to know. I'm still so much in the thinking phase. It's hard to go from the thinking to the knowing,
Mm-hmm.
to the feeling. You know.
So, just get in touch with me. I can give you. So there's a Venerable Chudran has a bunch of really great guided meditations. On the basically, you know, she'll kind of help you in the same way as Geshe was talking about, but kind of guide you through it. And I find it really helpful to do that, just because the thing that I think is difficult though is that after you do them a few times, you really have to you really have to use your vigilance to keep from doing it by rote. You know, because eventually you start to know the meditations, and you start to your mind wants to cheat your way through it and go quick. You know, oh, I know that. Oh, I know that. I know that already. And I think that's the tough thing with analytical meditation. But yeah, I can at least give you some like more structured things so that you don't feel so, you know, like trying to. It's because it's really difficult without somebody really, you know, pointing you in the right direction, I think.
Thank you.
Any others? Yes, please, 1, 2.
I don't even know if this is the right place or time to ask the question. It's not so much about meditation.
Yes.
It's how to prepare for the Dalai Lama's death.
It's a big question,
Yeah.
but it's past all of our minds.
Yeah, I think if we just have to accept, you know, the reality is that everyone will have to pass. Even the Buddha has passed. You know, for a Buddhist, the founder of the Buddhism, at least in our planet, even he had to pass away. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the everything. The Buddhism continue to flourish, continue to many teachers who came later and who continue to flourish the Dharma, and same thing, you know. I think when 13th Dalai Lama passed away, or even before he passed away, a lot of Tibetans were wondering what will happen to Tibet, because 13th Dalai Lama was so crucial among many of the Dalai Lama, and he, especially in that politically turmoil times. And but then 14th Dalai Lama came, and he exceeded more than the 13 Dalai Lamas, you know, as I was being told by some teachers and some lamas. Trijang Rinpoche, who was the junior tutor of the His Holiness Dalai Lama, once said, you know, if the Tibetan people have enough merit, this Dalai Lama will be even more flourishing than all the Dalai Lama put together. You know, and to some extent, you know, it is true. You know, how much he has. Even though other Dalai Lama has been great, many of them have been great and have helped and benefit so many, but still is limited for the Tibetan people. Whereas this Dalai Lama has been able to reach out beyond Tibetan people, beyond Buddhists, all different religions and all different believers, non-believers, and everyone's, and how much he has touched so transform so many people's hearts. I think, and so therefore, so even the 13th, 14th Dalai Lama, there will come a time when he will not be here anymore. But knowing that next one can come and even exile more than this Dalai Lama, he has done all the preparations and continue to do that. And I think and just knowing that, and even if I talk about our own organizations, FMG, when Lama Yeshe passed away, or even before he passed, a lot of people were worried about how this organization is going to go, because Lama Soba wasn't really. Nobody really knew about Lama Soba.
It's like weird to think
He
of.
was always back. He just came for teaching, and then after teaching, he's gone. You don't see him anywhere. He was not involved for running administration, running the organization. He only came for the teachings, and after teaching, he went back to his room, do his study, practice. Nobody really saw him, see him. And at the very beginning, it was Lama Yeshe who was involved with everything of running of organized. So a lot of people were very concerned about that. But after Lama Yeshe passed away, Lama Soba didn't want to take that. He went and asked Geshe Soba, who was the teacher who founded the Deer Park in medicine, who was and professor at University of Wisconsin, and he was teacher of both Lama Yeshe and Lama Soba and many others. So Lama Soba went asked him if he could take over the organization, and he said he is not interested, and so Geshe Soba says he is not interested and encouraged Lama Soba to do. And I think Lama Soba even went to His Holiness to say if he can take the organizations. But also His Holiness advised that he should continue, and he should continue to keep on. And then that is what he started. And then after he started, I think when he took over, it was maybe like 20 to 30 projects and centers and projects, and now it is more than 160 different projects centered in that, and so sometimes we get so used to certain individuals who has been done so much, and then we think once that person is gone, maybe how that organizations or the country, whatever, how it's going to go and function. But we always come when someone get an opportunity, they rise above it. And sometimes when there is someone there, someone who is doing that job, then there is someone who has potential but who has not raised to that. And when that person is not there, there's someone who has potential raise up to that, and then they take over, And so, and you see that all over the world throughout the histories, in every kind of different organizations and all of that. And so therefore I think we should just we should be some more positive.
Yes.
Basically. Be a positive. I think that's the only way to kind of move forward, So yeah, that is my way of looking, my perceptions, and my own way of preparing. Yeah. Yes.
Even in the best of times, I only have an hour or two I practice a day. So then I have all these other hours where I'm relating to everything and everybody else in the world, and that maybe you might address sort of how we take, the practice that we have and bring it to day-to-day life that we
Mm-hmm.
live.
Oh, it is absolutely necessary. It is absolutely necessary to bring our practice in our everyday life. You know, you can't live practice just on the cushions where we might find 1 hour for you is great. Some people struggles to find 10 minutes on cushion to practice. You know, and so the point is whatever time we can find 10 minutes, half hour, 1 hour, 2, 3 hours, whatever we find time, able to manage our time, to be able to find time to practice, meditate on the cushions, and then trying to bring that in our everyday life, how to bring that in everyday life, and not to kind of disconnect between your meditation on cushions and your everyday life. You should connect that together. What you meditate, then you bring in your everyday activities. And by applying your meditation, which you have done on cushions, you try to bring that in real actions when something is happening in your everyday life, then that makes your practice on cushion more stronger. And next time when you go there, it becomes more stronger. So in that way, your meditation on cushions help your everyday dealings with others and yourself, and that in bringing the practice in there, that help your cushion. So it complementing each others, and I think that should be the way it should. That is why in all the lumbrims, gradual practice meditations, you find in all of those, with each section, you find meditation session and post meditation sessions, two different sections. And that is always that while they explain not only you need to meditate during the meditation session, but you have to bring that in the post meditation sessions. And in that way, the meditation helps the post meditation sessions. And because you bring that during the post meditation sessions, so when you go back to meditation again, it helps your meditations. And so that is how it should be. And so therefore, definitely, whatever our understanding, whatever our meditation that we did on cushions meditation, then we should try to bring that in post meditation. And that is the only way we can really make progress. Yeah. Yeah. So with that, beholding those five are also empty of inherent nature. That is the kind of the brief, and then is further going more details, where they explain four type of kind of emptiness. For profoundness of the emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness form, emptiness not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. So here, not only the persons that we also discuss is empty of inherent nature, but also the basis to which the persons imputed, the aggregate, they are also empty of inherent nature. So starting with form, okay? Form, physical form is one of the basis for which to be imputed as a person. So maybe when we establish in our meditation and practice that person is, empty of inherently truly existence, and then we are able to let go of strong clinging and grasping of the self. Okay? But then we think, because the person is imputed, even though it is merely imputed, because it is merely imputed on the aggregates, such as physical aggregate, maybe the physical aggregate is truly inherent existence. So while you don't have clinging to the clinging and grasping to the person, but maybe you might start have clinging and grasping to the aggregate, which is the basis of the imputed person. And so then even that, the basis to which the person is imputed, even the basis such as aggregate, also is empty of inherent nature. And again, if we do the same kind of process that we did with the persons, is my head the body? Physical form, when we say physical form, body, is my head the body? Is my neck the body? Is my shoulder? Is my hand? Is my each of my fingers? Is my torso the body? Is my organs or inside body? If my thigh, leg, and all of that, and if you go detailedly with each part of the body, none of those is body. Each part of those body is not a body. My skin is not my body. My flesh is not my body. My bone is not my body. My eye is not my body. My nose is not my body. And if you go that, then there is, and so again, you cannot find that body within the basis that makes the body, the parts. And therefore, the form, when you do that analysis, ultimate analysis, you cannot find within that basis. Therefore, it cannot be inherently existent or ultimately existent. Okay? But at the same time, okay? Yeah, so maybe, first maybe there. And so that is, form is empty. Okay? And you do same. Then we think, oh, the form, the body, in terms of body, Okay, now body is also do not exist inherently, truly, and it is merely imputed to its basis, such as the head, the shoulder, the torso, and all of that. Then maybe what about then each of those parts? What about those which on the basis which the body, and even then so for the head, one of the basis, one of the parts of the body. Again, if you say, what is the head? Is my scalp head? Is my brain my head? Eyes, nose, if you go in, the bone, the skin, the flesh, the muscles, the vein, none of them is the head. So head is merely imputed on those parts. And then again you go, what about those parts which make the head? Nose, eyes. What is nose? Again, if you is the bone the nose? Is the flesh of that that nose? Is the skin? All of that again is not nose. And if you go down, break to the most smallest particles. And same thing. And then when you do that, then there is nothing to really cling and grasp. Yeah? So form is empty. So when we do that kind of analysis, by ultimate analysis, you cannot find within its basis or its parts that make the form. And so that means there is no form at all. No, it doesn't mean there is a form. Therefore, emptiness form. So it doesn't mean emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. Okay, emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. So therefore, because emptiness, form is possible. If it wasn't the emptiness, form will be not possible. Form is possible, because of all parts coming together.
Because of independent.
Because independent, yeah. Depending on its cause, condition, its parts, and the subject imputing, all of that coming together. That is why form is possible. If it's not emptiness, If it's inherently existent, then it doesn't depend on all these factors, and they're coming together from all factors. Then if something becomes possible, it's not possible. So because that is why in one of Nagarjuna's he said, because of emptiness, everything is possible. If it wasn't the emptiness, nothing is possible. It's just the opposite of what we think normally. You get it? When we think of emptiness, then we feel nothingness, nihilism, and therefore nothing can be possible. And Nagarjuna said, because of emptiness, everything becomes possible. If it wasn't emptiness, nothing would be possible. Because things are not inherently or existing by its own power in own sight without depending on other factors, conditions. If it's not empty of that, then nothing would be possible. Okay. But things are because depending arising, depending on other factors, condition, cause, and so forth. Therefore, by changing those factors, by changing the cause, by changing the conditions, everything becomes possible. And so, therefore, here, because of emptiness, form is possible. So, emptiness is form. Because of emptiness, the form will become possible. Or in other way, we can talk about, the emptiness of form and form of emptiness of form, and the basis, the object of that emptiness, the form. Also in that sense, With that kind of ultimate analysis, then we find form is empty of inherent, independent existence, ultimate existence. And so that emptiness is the emptiness of form is possible because of the form. If there is no form, we cannot talk about emptiness of form. Okay? If there is no form, we cannot talk about impermanence of the form. If there is no form, we cannot talk about emptiness of the form. Empty form of form would not exist if there is no form. So the emptiness of form depends on form. At the same time, the form also depends on emptiness of the form. Without the emptiness of the form is not possible. Yes?
So in a way, emptiness is dependent arising.
Yes. But in order to have the correct understanding of correct understanding emptiness, we need to have subtle understanding dependent arising. The gross level of dependent arising is not enough to have the correct understanding of emptiness.
Is space considered form also?
Yeah, dependent arising.
Everything is form.
No.
Space is the one thing that
Space is not a form.
Space, okay.
Form here refer to physical matter, physical. Of course, it could refer to any shape, any colors, all this form, But here it's particularly referring to our physical form because he is talking about the aggregates of the self, the basis of the self, our 5 aggregates which make the self, and so he's going that. So here in particularly is referring to our physical body, physical form body. Here when you say, but of course we can also apply to all the form as well.
You were also saying, but space is still a dependent arising.
Yes.
It's just not dependent on a cause to create it.
Yes. the space is dependent on its parts.
On its parts. And
If we
it's
talk
being
about
level
space, there's east side of the space, west side, you know,
So you call that phenomenons.
yeah, we call phenomena, yeah, something, anything that exists, yeah, phenomena, permanent phenomena, or permanent existence. And yeah, we can talk about, so even the space has its parts, you know. The northern space, southern space, eastern space, not, and even with a small space, still you can have all of that parts. So it's dependent on these parts, and definitely depending on the mind
that perceives
to
it.
to impute. You know, what is space? What is space? Space is some phenomena that is absence of something. I don't know. You know, maybe different.
Absence of form.
That's
Yeah. You can say that. What I'm trying to say, maybe there might be different definition in different, I don't know, in a different culture, in a different of that, but in terms of according to the Buddhist, some of the Buddhist studies, the definitions of space giving, that is absence of thoricasm, is merely absence, something that is phenomena, that is absence of something that can be abstracted and can be touched, you know. So maybe if we say is merely absence of form, yeah, maybe there is similarity, even though how pervasive, which is more pervasive, I don't know, but so we decided something which is merely something that exists, but which is merely absence of something that can be abstracted and touched, that we're going to call it a space. The mind label it as a space.
So a thought is in this last sentence. It says consciousness, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. As a thought in that category.
Yeah, feeling is part of thoughts. Discrimination is thought.
Okay.
Compositional factors are thoughts. Consciousness has thought and non. Maybe I will maybe
Awareness.
come maybe. So maybe first let me finish the four ones.
We're getting to the harder part.
So form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Okay, because of emptiness, and form is possible, and therefore form exists. So it's that it doesn't mean they not exist at all. Okay, and emptiness not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. You know, so. The nature of the form and nature of the one way of understanding is, you know, as I mentioned, there cannot be emptiness without depending on its objects. You know, when you talk about emptiness, we talk about emptiness of certain objects. Okay, we cannot just talk about abstract emptiness. We talk about emptiness of the self, emptiness of phenomena, emptiness of the book, emptiness of something in relation to objects. If there is no object, there is no emptiness of that object. So therefore, if there is no form, there is no emptiness of form. And so therefore, the emptiness of form is dependent on the form. And therefore, the nature of the emptiness is not totally separate from the nature of the form itself.
So the ness is the nature of.
The ness is, I think, just to make difference between empty and emptiness is something, you know.
Yeah, but,
'Cause it's not.
not more than that, I mean, there's,
If you say empty, then it can mean just nothingness.
Right.
But emptiness kind of suggests
Empty of something.
that there's something, okay?
okay,
It
so
is-
it's the nature, it's the something of empty.
Yes, yes,
That
yes,
was what
yes.
Nature of it.
Really, the translations should say, you know, form is empty of inherent existence. You know, kind of.
Oh,
parenthetically.
that we have to refer because he already said at the very beginning,
Right.
5 aggregates are also empty of inherent nature,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to repeat that inherent nature to each of
Every
them.
single time.
You know, it's like you already said, and you have to bring that to every one of them, apply that.
Yeah.
Okay, otherwise it becomes too long. The sutra is going to be very long.
Well, I was just thinking of Tongpan Yi, the Yi.
Tongpan Yi, yeah, yeah.
The Yi, I thought was a meaning of the ness.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
that really meant something.
yes, yes.
That's why I was asking about the
Yeah, we
meaning,
said
yes.
if you said tongpa, it would mean just empty. That could mean nothingness, you know. Or, but this when you say ni tongpa ni, then it means suchness.
Okay,
Such.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the somethingness, yeah.
Yeah, suchness.
All
You
right,
know.
all right.
Mm.
The suchness of empty.
Mm-hmm. And so emptiness not other. So that form or the emptiness of form is not other than ultimate nature of the form. You know. The emptiness of the form is not other than the ultimate nature of the form.
Which is like-
Yeah. And also the ultimate nature of the form is not other than emptiness of the form. So therefore, form is also because emptiness is not other than form. The emptiness of the form is not other than ultimate nature of the form. And the form is not the ultimate nature of the form is also not other than emptiness of the form. So the ultimate nature of the form and emptiness means same. The emptiness form or ultimate nature of the form same, and same. In also other way of understanding is that you know. When it says form is empty, it explains the ultimate nature of the form. Emptiness form, then it explains the relative or conventional reality of the form, that even though ultimately it does not exist on a relative level, on conventional level, there is form exists. Okay? Not only these two truths exist simultaneously, the ultimate and relative or conventional truth of the form exists simultaneously at the same time, but they are not totally unconnected, different nature. They are same nature. Okay, and so they don't contradict each other.
And that's basically dualistic view. Right?
Yes, when we think that they are contradicting two different nature or entity, then it is a dualistic view, and so therefore there are not two different entity or nature. Okay, form and that, and so they don't contradict each other, but they actually complement each other. Not only they complement each other, but they have to be understood and to practice in union, the true truth. You cannot ignore one of those true truths. And so sometimes what happens is because we try, sometimes there is ultimate reality, nothing exists ultimately, so because nothing exists ultimately, Then if we started to think nothing exists in that way, we try to train in that way, then we go to, then we totally ignore the relative or conventional world. Then you have problem. You know, you will have a problem.
Yeah, right away.
You know. But on the same time, if we just function on relative and conventional level, if we don't understand the ultimate level, then also there is another problem. That's why we are some. So therefore, we have to understand both relative, both truth, and try to practice both together. You know, and so therefore that is where it explains how explaining the true truth. Form is empty, ultimate truth. Emptiness form, relative thing. Emptiness not other than form. Form is not other than how they don't contradict each other, but how they complement each other, and how they should be practiced in union, in together. Yes, please.
It's kind of a definition of quantum physics. It's kind of the definition of quantum physics.
Yeah, it seems from what I heard, and it seems seems like same come to a similar kind of understanding and result. You know, I was watching one of those experiments, the two what you call what was it called? Like they have two things, you know, two layers, and then they shoot with some kind of light.
Yeah, it existed in two places at the same time.
Yeah, and then depending on observing
Right.
whether it become matters or whether it become waves,
Yeah.
according to the observation. So you know, so when you look those things, then it just come to very, very same of understanding the way they explain. And actually, His Holiness was saying, I don't remember the name. One of the Indian scientists, one of the Indian scientists, told the Lama, you know, one time in one of conversations, he said, quantum physics was already kind of studied and learned by Nagarjuna, and he had already written about it long time ago, even though it seems to be new kind of theory or new understanding or new science. But
He just didn't prove it with math.
So that is so then you apply that to all other aggregates. Feelings, emptiness is feeling. Feeling is empty, emptiness is feeling. Feeling is not other than emptiness not other than feeling. Discrimination is empty, emptiness is discriminations. Discrimination not other than emptiness not other than discriminations. Compositional factor is empty, emptiness is compositional factors. Compositional factor is not other than emptiness not other than compositional factors. Consciousness is empty, emptiness is consciousness. Consciousness not other than emptiness not other than consciousness. So you apply that to all five aggregates and all other phenomena. You can apply to all phenomena. And so then I wanted to kind of talk a little bit aggregate, because the questions whether conception is included here in aggregates. As I was saying, in Buddhist study of mind, Buddhist psychology or Buddhist study of mind, it is a big kind of huge subject matter, and most of the studies are on that. You know, there is very not much study on actually physical world in Buddhist studies. Mostly is the mental world. You know, about, and so in that, when they talk about the mind, they talk about primary mind, primary consciousness or mind, and mental factors. And primary mind is explained more like a canvas of the of painting, you know.
Mm.
And mental factors are the one which you started to draw and which you started to paint and all of that. The function of mental factor is that, whereas primary mind is more like the frame canvas, kind of open kind of canvas, you know. So anyway, so when they talk about primary mind and mental factors, and when you talk about primary mind, then there are six primary mind, 5 senses and mental primary mind. And then when you talk of mental factors, then they talk of 51 mental factors. Okay, some of them are virtuous, some of them are non-virtuous, delusional. Some of them are more neutral, with neither virtuous, neither delusional. And so they talk about all different set of mental factors and their functionings and so on and so on. Okay. So when we talk about 5 aggregates, you know, we talk about physical aggregates, form, and then 4 are the mental aggregates.
Mhm.
So when we talk about consciousness, that is the primary mind. Okay. So primary mind. So it's saying time to stop. So it's talking on primary mind. And from 51 mental factors, so because in mind there is primary mind and mental factors. Among the 51 mental factors, then 3 are there. And feeling is one of mental factors. Discriminating mind is one of mental factors. Discriminating mind here doesn't necessarily mean discriminate in a negative way, but is to be able to distinguish white, black, whatever this is this, this is this. That's distinguishing mind.
Right.
That's discriminating mind. So feeling and that. So when you from 51 mental factors, when you exerted 2, feeling and discriminating mind, how many left? 49. Yeah. 49 mental factors are the compositional factors. When you say compositional factors, that is the rest of the 51 mental factors.
Okay.
So in this, all the mind and mental factors are included. The consciousness refers to mental consciousness, and then the feeling and discriminating are particular mental factors, and the rest of 49 mental factors are included in compositional factors when it says. Okay? And even though there's 51 mental factors, why, you know, 2 special feeling and discrimination are exerted and make it 5 aggregates, you know? It could be 2 aggregates, it could be 3 aggregates, it could be 7 aggregates, but why you see 5 aggregates? So at that, and in some it explains, you know, because those 2 play a big role, feeling and discriminating, feel a big role in how we circle in the samsara. Okay, we in getting in touch and encountering with certain object, we get certain feelings: pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neutral feeling. You know, when we meet certain object, when we come in contact with certain object, when you encounter certain things, object, whatever that is, object, we have a certain feelings in relation to that. You know. Maybe the sequence is slightly. So when we encounter, you know, certain objects, then our mind interpret, or our mind kind of distinguish or discriminate it is as nice or not nice, good, bad, or depending on how we interpret and how we distinguish, how we discriminate, then we have certain feeling in relation to that. I meet Bill and say, oh, he seems not nice guy. Then I started to have a.
Some days.
I started to have a, you know, some kind of unpleasant feelings. in coming with contact with that, or my mind see him and then interpret, oh, he seems a nice guy, and then just that my interpretation, my mind saying he seems a nice guy, nice, then it brings some kind of close feeling, some positive feelings, pleasant feelings. So according to how we discriminate or how we distinguish, how we interpret it, according to that we experience differently in relation to that object. And then when we have pleasant feeling in relation to that object, then we get attached to it. When we get an unpleasant feeling in relation to object, then we have aversion and disliking, and then that lead to anger and so forth, and that arises. And through that attachment, anger, then so many negative karma are created, and then we continue to take rebirth in the cycle existence, samsara, and continue experience. So therefore, because these two play a big role in that particularly, and so therefore there is in order to make some points, to specify how that, and so it is exerted to these two, this particular two mental factor among all other mental factors, and that is how five aggregates comes into, or skandha or aggregates. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geshe.
So we will have the dedications, and so again, due to all the virtues that we have created and others have created until time, may the Dharma flourish and benefit countless sentient beings. May His Holy Dalai Lama, David Lama Savarumboche, all our teachers, gurus, holy beings have long, healthy life, and all their noble deeds and wishes will fulfill according to their wishes. And may we always be under their guidance, care, in all lifetimes until we achieve enlightenment. And may we be able to please them by applying the practice to our practices. And may Western Ling here Center grow, expand, and be more and more benefit to more sentient beings. And may all the volunteers of the center, benefactors, supporters, and people who participate in different programs, and may all sentient beings have long, healthy life, and most importantly, happy and meaningful life. And may each and every sentient being, including oneself, be able to actualize fully enlightenment as soon as possible, and liberate all sentient beings to fully enlightenment. Changjo semjo rembo che ma ke pa na ke kyo che ke wa nyamba me pa ya kong le kong tu pe wa sho ya wa di nyu do da lama sang ke tu kyo ne do wa chi kya ma le pa te sa la kwe pa sho kang re ra we ko re shin kam de pen da de wa ma le chung we ne Chere se wang pinzin gyatso ye shape se te pato tengyo che tupso chanshe jangwen gyawe ten zinjong pewe kunso topo ze choson kuwe lemo tutu ba naso duje kundu shape. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you.